Welcome to this deep dive. We're cracking open a really interesting source today, some recent insights from cognitive market research. And we're going to explore the global market for Fresh Xuan Paper.
Right, that incredible handmade paper from China.
Exactly. Used for calligraphy, brush painting, you know the one.
Yeah.
And our mission today basically is to kind of cut through the data, get the real story behind these numbers.
Figure out what's actually driving the growth of this, well, centuries-old material in today's world.
Yeah, exactly.
It's kind of remarkable when you look at it. The source, it lays out the global market size. Started at $119.2 million back in 2021.
Okay.
Then grew to $140 million just a few years later in 2025.
Right.
And the projection, $193.1 million by 2033.
Wow.
What's really fascinating there is that steady, it's almost relentless growth, across the whole period.
Yeah.
Shows a global CGR of 4.1%.
Okay, let's maybe unpack that just a tiny bit.
Say.
CGR, compound annual growth rate.
Right.
So think of it like the average yearly growth rate, but smoothed out over time.
Yeah, it irons out the bumps.
Exactly. It tells you this trend isn't just some one-year blip, it's consistent. And seeing 4.1% globally for something so traditional, so specific, like Xuan paper, that really jumped out at me.
Me too. It's clearly not some, fading niche market.
No, not at all.
It definitely points to something deeper, some kind of enduring value.
So where's all this growth actually coming from?
Well, let's look closer. The source breaks it down by region.
Okay.
And naturally, Asia-Pacific's the big one.
Powerhouse, yeah. The source highlights it as the strongest market, not just size, but growth rate, too.
Definitely. It went from $44.3 million in 2021, projected to hit $75.7 million by 2033.
Wow.
And that leads all regions with a 4.7 Pacific CAGR.
Right. And within Asia-Pacific, well, no big surprise, China, its birthplace, is dominant.
Expected to reach $33 million by 2033, yeah.
But here's the really surprising bit, I thought, from the source. India. Started smaller, sure, $8.2 million in 2021. But it has the fastest growth rate in the whole region, a really strong 5.2% CAGR.
5.2, that's impressive. Projected to hit $15.1 million.
India growing faster than China in this specific market, that's a real eye-opener the source gives us.
It really is. And the source links that directly to rising demand in art education.
Yeah, and cultural preservation.
Yeah, exactly. That tells you a lot about how this paper's finding maybe new life there or renewed interest.
Definitely a story there.
Right. And beyond those two giants in the region, the source shows pretty steady growth elsewhere. Japan's solid, over 4% CAGR.
Expected to reach $7.7 million.
Yeah, and even smaller markets like South Korea, they're climbing too, up to $4.5 million.
So okay.
In Southeast Asia, the source describes it as a developing market for traditional art paper.
Still growing, though.
Oh, yeah, climbing from $6.4 million to $10.4 million by 2033. So it's a region where, tradition is meeting this expanding interest. Australia's in there too. Modest, but rising.
Okay, fascinating. So Asia-Pacific is clearly the engine. From the heartland in China to this booming educational demand in India.
Right.
Let's cross the Pacific. How does North America look?
North America is the second largest market overall, growing from $33.7 million back in 2021.
Yep.
Expected to reach $51 million by 2033. That's a solid 3.6% CAGR.
And the U.S., predictably, is the biggest piece of that pie.
Absolutely. Projected to hit $41.7 million by 2033.
Here's another interesting detail from the source. Canada actually has a slightly stronger growth rate.
Oh, right. 4% CGR.
Compared to the U.S.'s 3.5%. And the source suggests, or kind of guesses, this might be because of increased interest specifically in Asian calligraphy.
In craft papers up there.
Yeah. That's a specific driver called out right in the data.
It is. And Mexico also shows healthy growth. 3.8% CAGR.
Reaching $3.6 million by 2033.
And fueled by, well, rising cultural and educational use. Similar, actually, to what we saw driving things in India.
Interesting. So education seems to be...
This audio was created with Podcastle.ai.
Similar, actually, to what we saw driving things in India.
Interesting. So education seems to be a bit of a global theme here.
It seems like it, yeah.
Okay, let's shift gears. Europe.
Europe. Market there projected to reach $43.8 million by 2033.
Okay.
Posting a 3.9% CAGR, which is actually slightly faster than North America, interestingly enough.
Oh, yeah. Okay. Who's leading in Europe?
Germany leads the way with a pretty healthy 4.3% CAGR, expected to reach $8.1 million.
And the source explicitly points to why.
Right, doesn't it? It attributes it directly to Germany's strong fine arts sector.
Right, so that's a very specific driver, maybe different from the broader cultural education we talked about elsewhere.
Exactly. It's more about the established art scene there.
Okay. And the UK?
Not far behind. 4.2% CAGR, reaching $5.1 million. France shows consistent but maybe more moderate growth, 3.3% CAGR.
Italy's a bit slower.
Yeah, 3% CAGR, growing from $1.8 million to $2.4 million. Russia sees a steady climb, too, up to $5.6 million. Spain and Luxembourg, smaller, but growing.
Gotcha. But what about the rest of Europe segment? That looked pretty significant in the numbers.
It really is. It's expected to hit $12.2 million by 2033. And it's growing at a robust 4.4% CAGR, faster than Germany or the UK.
So what's driving that growth in the rest of Europe, according to the source?
Okay, this is interesting. The source indicates it's driven by increasing demand for art restoration.
Restoration? With fresh paper?
Yeah, and design studio applications. It feels a bit counterintuitive, doesn't it?
It really does.
But it tells us the demand isn't just about creating brand new art. It might be for specific high-end restoration techniques or maybe design work where these traditional high-quality materials are really valued.
That's a fascinating angle from the source. Different drivers, but all pushing growth across the continent.
Exactly.
Okay, what about South America?
South America is a smaller market, but definitely growing. Brazil really stands out.
Yeah.
Strong 4.5% CAGR. It's expected to more than double its 2021 value, reaching $4.4 million by 2033.
Okay, quite strong growth there.
Yeah. And the source notes that even though other countries like Argentina, Colombia, Chile, Peru, they're smaller markets, their growth reflects what the source calls a, quote, niche but growing appreciation of handmade paper in Latin art circles.
Ah, okay. So again, a very specific cultural context driving demand there.
Seems like it.
All right, finally, the Middle East and Africa.
Right. This segment shows, well, the most modest growth rates among all the regions we've looked at.
Okay.
Egypt and Turkey are projected to reach just over $1 million each by 2033.
Lower CAGRs there too.
Yeah. Egypt's around 2.6%, Turkey slightly higher. The rest of the Middle East climbs to about $1.7 million.
And the driver there, according to the source?
Primarily art institutions and cultural exchange programs.
So maybe less about widespread education or individual artists like we saw elsewhere.
Right. More about formal institutions, cross-cultural stuff.
Got it. Okay, so let's try and connect all these dots. What does this all actually mean?
Well, the source material clearly shows this steady global growth for Fresh Xuan Paper. That's the headline. But the real story, I think, is how and why that growth is happening so differently in various parts of the world.
Right. We saw those overarching drivers mentioned, didn't we? Like a general renewed appreciation for traditional mediums.
Right. Rising art exports, expanding cultural education.
Yeah.
Those are kind of the big themes.
Yeah. But then digging into the regions, we found all those specific forces the source highlighted.
Exactly. Art education really popping in India and Mexico.
That strong fine arts connection in Germany.
The specific interest in calligraphy and crafts in Canada.
Art restoration and design in parts of Europe, which was surprising.
Yeah. And those Latin art circles in South America.
It's definitely not just one single thing driving this market, is it?
Not at all. It's more like a complex tapestry, you know. Specific cultural needs, educational trends, artistic practices, all translating into demand for this unique traditional paper, but in different ways across continents.
The source really makes it clear that while the market's growing overall, the forces behind it are pretty diverse.
Absolutely.
Okay, so we've taken quite a deep dive here into the numbers, into the story they tell about the global Fresh Xuan paper market, looking from 2021 right through the projections to 2033.
Yeah, we saw Asia Pacific leading the charge. As expected, maybe.
Followed by North America and Europe making really strong contributions.
And even those niche, but definitely growing interests in South America and the Middle East.
And we've highlighted all those different drivers. The source points to education, preservation, fine arts, calligraphy, even art restoration.
Showing how all these specific needs are fueling this global trend.
So this brings up, I think, an important question for you, the listener, to maybe think about. Given this clear, steady global growth for a material that's so deeply rooted in ancient tradition, what does that really tell us about the enduring appeal, maybe the adaptability of handmade crafts and cultural heritage in an age that feels increasingly dominated by digital creation? Okay, let's unpack this. Welcome
Yeah.
to this deep dive where we are exploring your sources on the Fresh Xuan Paper market.
That's right. We're taking a close look at what's shaping this unique market. The drivers, the restraints, and, well, the trends that are pointing to its future.
Yeah, and our goal here is really just to distill the most important insights from the material you've shared, give you a clear picture.
Let's get into it.
So first up, the growth drivers. Your sources really seem to highlight the...
This audio was created with podcastle.ai.
First up, the growth drivers. Your sources really seem to highlight the growing global interest in traditional Chinese calligraphy and painting. That's a big one, right?
Oh, absolutely. It's fundamental yuan paper.
Yeah.
Well, its properties are just ideal for these art forms.
Like what specifically?
Well, the sources mention its excellent ink absorption, which
Yeah.
is key for those subtle shades and lines. And then there's the texture, the feel of it. Plus, it lasts.
Durability for
But-
preserving art.
Exactly.
Yeah.
So as more people globally get into it through museums or like online groups, demand for the real deal for Xuan paper goes up.
And it's not just artists driving it, is it? The sources mention government initiatives too.
Yeah, that's a good point. There's support, funding for cultural heritage programs, exhibitions.
Like promoting the tradition.
Right, which keeps materials like Xuan paper relevant and introduces them to new people, new generations.
Okay. Then what about art schools, hobbyists? Your sources touched on that too.
They create a kind of baseline demand. Think about art schools, local clubs, even those online forums. They need paper.
Different grades, I suppose?
Yeah, exactly. Beginners might use cheaper stuff. Experts need the premium grades. It builds a really broad base of users.
Okay, so demand seems pretty strong, helped by culture and support. But scaling up production seems to be a real challenge. Let's talk restraints. What's the main bottleneck?
Raw materials. That comes through loud and clear in your sources. Traditional Xuan paper needs very specific stuff, like rice straw and especially blue sandalwood bark.
That's hard to get.
It can be, yeah. It's seasonal, sometimes scarce. So that limits how much paper they can actually make, and it pushes up the cost, especially for the really good paper.
Limited ingredients, limited product makes sense. And the process itself sounds intense.
It really is. The sources talk about like over 100 manual steps.
100, wow.
Yeah, sorting fibers, soaking, beating, pulping, forming the sheets, drying. It's not automated. It's very labor intensive, takes a long time.
Need skilled people then.
Exactly. And finding and keeping artisans who know these traditional techniques.
Yeah.
That's another bottleneck. It's passed down knowledge,
Right. And I remember reading something about the paper itself being sensitive.
That's another restraint. It's prone to mildew, moisture damage.
Oh.
So you have to store it really carefully. Bad conditions can ruin it, which affects transport, display, everything.
Okay, so we've got tradition driving demand, but materials and complex skills holding back supply. Where is it heading? What are the emerging trends?
Well, what's really interesting is how it's being used in new ways. Your sources point to a lot of fusion with contemporary art.
Fusion. How so?
Artists are using Xuan paper in mixed media, combining it with digital printing, even using it in installations. It's moving beyond just traditional scrolls.
So old material, new applications. That's cool.
Yeah, it challenges ideas about what the paper is for.
Yeah, there was another surprising one. Sustainability.
Right. Because it's made from natural biodegradable fibers, it's actually finding a niche in eco-friendly packaging.
Packaging, like for luxury goods.
Exactly. Luxury items, artisanal products, it gives this unique texture, a story. Fits with that sustainable consumer demand.
Huh, interesting. And getting it out there globally, e-commerce must be playing a role.
Oh, definitely. It's huge. Online platforms let even small makers reach international customers.
So more accessible.
Much more. You see things like calligraphy kits, sample packs, tutorials. It lowers the barrier for people everywhere to try it out or buy it.
Okay, so quite a journey. A material deeply rooted in tradition, facing some serious production hurdles.
Yeah, materials, skills, even sensitivity.
But also finding these really surprising new roles in contemporary art, sustainable design, and reaching a global audience online.
It's this fascinating balance, isn't it? Ancient craft meeting modern demands and opportunities.
Which leads us to a final thought for you listening. Given Fresh Xuan Paper's reliance on these very specific, limited natural materials and this incredibly complex manual process, how does its success in modern areas, like blending with digital art or becoming eco-packaging, challenge our usual ideas about how ancient crafts can adapt? What does its path tell us about preserving heritage while still innovating in our fast-paced world? Something to think about.
This audio was created with podcastle.ai.